Good afternoon. My name is Bill Bunch. I'm Executive Director of the Save Our Springs Alliance. I'm also a lawyer. I've been practicing environmental and land use law here in Austin since 1987. And we're here with a range of representatives from Austin environmental groups, neighborhood associations, tree protection groups, and others who are concerned about the future of our city and managing our growth in a responsible way. And we're here to talk specifically about a proposal on tomorrow's City Council agenda, item number 22, which would essentially repeal our city's ordinances that expire development projects and permits in a reasonable fashion, so that if a project is not built within a reasonable time, it has to refile, and when it does, to meet current standards that protect our neighborhoods, protect our watersheds, in particular Barton Springs, but all of our watersheds, and which protect a whole range of our city resources that we want to protect while we build our city. The item tomorrow is posted as an emergency item. It's being sponsored and rushed through by the Real Estate Council of Texas, and it would repeal the 1999 expiration ordinance that they themselves agreed to in a compromise that was arranged and put together by then Mayor Kirk Watson, who's now our state senator. It was also agreed to by the Chamber of Commerce, the Save Our Springs Alliance, and the Save Barton Creek Association. Why does RECA want to retrade this deal right now? We don't know. We think it's irresponsible for them to push the council to do this without a community process, exactly like the one that led to the compromise. And that's what we're calling for the City Council to do, to back up, take a deep breath, do not act hastily or irresponsibly without knowing what this action will do to our community, to our neighborhoods, to our urban tree canopy, to traffic, design standards, great streets, and our vulnerable watersheds. And to force the stakeholders into a similar process, just as Mayor Watson did, so that we can look at this, review it. It's been 14 years. Perhaps a review is appropriate. But rushing this through and merely throwing out this ordinance without any information about how many projects that have been expired or would soon expire under current ordinances, that they would be brought back to life and allowed to develop for decades, literally decades into the future, under much weaker standards from the 90s, the 80s, even the 70s and earlier. We're literally talking about zombie development projects that could live forever under old, dead ordinances that do not manage growth. Now, part of what RECA has said is that we're standing in the way of development and we're changing the rules too often. Well, they're proposing to change the rules without study. They push as many rule changes as anybody else does. And most of the rule changes that happen over the years have enhanced development, have been smart changes that we want to impose on new development. And so we find it extremely irresponsible what they're trying to rush this City Council forward in doing. One last comment. This is being done under threat of legislation from State Representative Paul Workman, who's a representative from Southwest Travis County. He has introduced a raft of bills that would gut the city's ability to manage growth and protect our vulnerable watersheds. We need our council to stand firm in coordination with Travis County and our Travis County delegation to fight these bills to the end. We shouldn't shoot ourselves in the face just in hopes that the legislature won't shoot us later. We will not buy peace. Our only choice is to fight this Austin bashing legislation and stand up for our local control powers. With that, I want to hand it over for a short statement from, who's next? Carol Lee from ANC. Yes. Okay, please.
Carol Lee, I'm president of the Austin Neighborhoods Council. I support everything Bill said and just want to emphasize that this is not a public emergency. This is an emergency created by special interests who are rushing to get entitlements prior to the enactment of new watershed regulations that are being reviewed right now, prior to the codification of the Imagine Austin plan, and prior to the 10-1 representation, which nobody can predict what they will be or do. So please oppose the repeal of this project duration. Right.
Howdy y'all, my name's Roy Whaley, W-A-L-E-Y, pardon me. I'm the chair of the Austin Sierra Club Conservation Committee. If I were to go over there and pull the fire alarm right now, I would be accused of a crime. I could be convicted of that crime, and I should be convicted of that crime, because it would be a false alarm, a false emergency, and that's what this is. This is a false emergency. There is no emergency. They have withheld information from the city council and the backup, and there was no mention of 2 letters, one from the assistant county attorney, Tom Knuckles, one from the city's own law department, and an affidavit from Planning and Development Review, Greg Guernsey. All of them last summer saying, we are in compliance with Chapter 245. We are doing the right thing in Austin. And now there is an emergency. There is no emergency. Every time that the citizens of Austin get involved and we go through a public process, whatever is before us is improved. It is improved every time. And that's not happening this time because of this false emergency status. They did agree to send it back to Planning Commission, but once again, they didn't have all the information they needed to make a decision. And so how can you make a good decision without the proper information? And they should have that. Now then, it is a matter of one person, one legislator from the Austin area, Paul Workman, pushing this through for RECA. Where are our other representatives? Why are they not representing us? Where is Senator Watson on this? What does Senator Watson have to say about this? What about Representative Mark Strama, who has said that he may want to be our mayor someday? Does he want to be the mayor of Austin, or does he want to be the mayor of future Houston? Is he going to allow us to gut our ordinance like a fish and just completely gut it after all the decades of work that have gone into this? We bemoan all the time the lack of citizen involvement as far as voting is concerned. But when citizens truly get involved and come down here, we are ignored. And so that will take decades of citizen work and throw it out the window. It will have been meaningless. It will take any future involvement and make it be meaningless. We have done a wonderful job with our representatives, with our city council over the years, including Mayor Watson in the 90s, who helped broker this, and we have protected our environment. We will not have environmental protections if this goes through. When we say that, when we hear from RECA and others that this is too onerous for us to be able to develop, and then out of the other side of their mouth, we hear we're the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States. How do you make those two balance out? If it's too hard to develop here, why do we have the phenomenal growth that we do? We can have both. We can have protection and we can have growth. We can have balance. But it's going to take leadership on the state level and on the city level. Thank you.
I'm Michael Fossum. I'm the Executive Director of the Austin Heritage Tree Foundation. I'm very concerned by this emergency that's been called. I do not support that. If this goes through, the Heritage Tree Ordinance, which helps preserve large trees in Austin, which are very important to us on many different levels and for many different reasons, that ordinance, among others, is going to be devastated. We're probably going to lose hundreds of large trees that could otherwise be designed around and brought into developments in order to enhance those and be there for our enjoyment. These trees, if we lose them, they can't be replaced. It takes hundreds of years to grow these trees, and we have to have the soil volume available to do it. And if we put concrete over everything because we're going back to the 70s in our design standards, then there's going to be no place for these trees to exist. So I'd like to ask all the citizens of Austin that see us speak here today to take action. Call your city council member, email your city council member, come to the city council meeting tomorrow, go to your state representatives and tell them that we need to design our standards for our growth here on the local level and not be dictated to by the state. But our first priority is to get city council to respond to us and to give this more consideration before railroading this through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Hello, my name is Stuart Snyder. I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Austin area. The League of Women Voters has long supported a standardized, streamlined, and understandable development process. Removing the project duration provision in city code would create a wide variation in how projects are continued forward. Some would be functioning under 1970s code, some would be functioning under 1990s code. We think projects should proceed in a parallel fashion. All of them should be operating under the same current code. We do not want to see this happen where projects are proceeding wildly out of compliance with current city code. The League reaches its positions with full membership agreement. It is very hard for us to agree on anything, and when we agree on something, generally elected officials take notice. In this case, we are strongly opposed to the removal of the project duration provision in city code. It should remain intact. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Carol Torgrimson. I served for over 2 years on the Citizens Advisory Task Force of the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. A great deal of time, effort, and money was expended in creating that plan, and this effort to repeal the project duration ordinance will go a long way to undermining all the effort that went into that. Everyone in this city who took the time to make inputs into that plan should understand that their inputs will now be basically nullified if this goes through. Not only that, but part of the Imagine Austin plan was to rewrite the Land Development Code. That's one of the priorities that staff set during the process. Right now, we've already established a group to oversee that. We're in the process of hiring consultants. So why are we rushing ahead and making a major change to the code when we already have a process set up to look at the code, readdress these very issues that the project duration represents? In addition to that, those of us who live in environmentally sensitive parts of the city are already dealing with ancient PUDs that date back to the 80s, and we understand what happens when things are developed under old watershed regulations. Environmentally sensitive areas are treated inappropriately now because they're under old rules. While right now there aren't that many of those old PUDs lying around yet to be completely developed, if this project duration is repealed, there will be hundreds of projects developed under those same old rules, and the environmental consequences can't be underestimated. It's going to be a disaster. Our scenic roadway provisions may very well be compromised. So many provisions of the code that we all take for granted will now not apply to projects that died years and years ago because the developers did not want to develop them or for reasons of their own. Bringing back those zombie projects is unfair. It makes it an unlevel playing field for those people who are now filing projects for development. We need to keep project duration in place. It may need to be altered, it may need to be rethought, but it does need to be repealed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm also a resident of the city of Austin here for the past several years, and I'm here today to also speak out and raise some concerns about what we're looking at this proposal to do away with these development timelines. I think probably there's nothing I can say too much that's not going to reiterate what people have already said, but I think it's very important to know that we don't want to create a system that creates a blanket backdoor way to get around the most important and the most up-to-date environmental and safety regulations that we have. It's important to realize that we have a process in place to look at these on a case-by-case basis already, and it's a very poor, I think, public policy decision to simply do away with them in a blanket way because there may be certain situations or certain circumstances in which it might make sense to create exemptions. Instead, we really need to be putting the bias in favor of weighing more on the side of the values of the community, making sure that the neighborhoods have control over what types of development they're going to see, and making sure that we have the best and the strongest and the most up-to-date and the most scientifically valid, the most data-supported environmental and safety regulations in place. Otherwise, we're going to see a situation where the burden is going to be placed on community members, many of whom who don't have the resources like lobbyists and professionals who can be at City Hall 24/7 all the time talking about these issues at a great disadvantage if the burden is going to be placed the other way. So I really think we need to keep the system the way it is, place the burden on those folks to say, why do we need exemptions for specific projects, and really look at making sure that we have the best regulations in place to make sure that the character and the nature of Austin are environmentally our environmental responsibility and stewardship of our resources doesn't start taking steps back. I think this is especially important in light of all of the things that are going on in the state legislature and other places that continually try to attack and take away control and power from local jurisdictions, from local neighborhoods. If we start contributing to that at the city level and opening the door for that, then the state legislature, those folks who are trying to control Austin and control us from the outside, they won't even have to do that anymore. They can let us do it ourselves. So
Right.
I think it's very important we keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramey. Anyone else? Right.
My name's Mary Engel, and I'm also Vice President of ANC. I want to pose a couple of questions to everyone. Why is project duration being offered as an emergency issue tomorrow? And is the reason because our city council is afraid of litigation? We need to actually encourage our city council to do the right thing, to stand up and be bold, because fear of litigation is no way to create city policies. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Susana Almanza with Poder People Organized in Defense of Earth and her Resources. And this morning I actually had a talk with my grandparent trees and the living waters. And they're very concerned. A lot of times their voices are not heard here because they speak very differently. But they're very concerned about the harm and the impact that could happen to the environment. And that's why I'm here to say not to repeal the project duration. This is very important that we protect our nature. And when we protect our environment, we also protect people. So let's make sure that the council makes the right decision. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so obviously we have a broad cross-section of Austin that's concerned about this issue. And so we'll conclude, but first, for the Sierra Club, Austin Sierra Club, I would also like to say that we invite Rika to come and sit down and talk to us. Come and sit down and talk to us, the people here, the community. Rather than to take this route, let's all sit down together. Let's have a good faith conversation and see what the real issue is. And then let's move forward as a community like we are here, rather than just a certain segment of the community. Let's all sit down together. That invitation is extended to the Real Estate Council of Austin. Do you have any questions?
I have a few questions. So how do other cities compare to Austin in terms of project duration ordinance laws? Is Austin more strict, less strict? And how is the comparison now?
Let me have the attorney answer this.
I don't have a good off the top of my hand comparison, but it's my understanding a lot of cities, and including our immediate neighbors, the smaller cities in our metro area, are very consistent, sort of 5 to 3 year type permit systems. but with larger projects negotiated much longer. And what's important to understand is under our the current law is fairly about as lenient as it can get. There are a lot of projects that are being grandfathered already for 20 years or more. What this would do is basically throw out expiration dates completely, and permits would live forever in some instances.
And a few of you said that while you oppose repeal, you might be up for a review of the ordinance rules and the project duration rules. What would that review look like? What do you think needs to be reviewed? What do you think might need to be changed?
Well, what we would propose is essentially to go a very similar process of how it was adopted. That you appoint a stakeholder task force that includes RECA, Chamber, environmental, neighborhood interests to sit down, look at the current ordinance, look at the state law, but also get the data on what is the real world impacts of whatever course of action is being urged. But that's one of the real crazy things about this is it's a black hole. The staff has not provided council a lick of information about what this really means to neighborhoods, the environment, the traffic, the whole future of our city. There's not a clue how many zombie projects would be resurrected or granted eternal life if this thing passes.
Phil, I'm sorry I wasn't here for whether she's going out of the station, but for your comments. But what does this mean as far as as far as the Sabre Springs ordinance?
Well, it would extend grandfathering to some projects that would otherwise have to comply with SOS, and just like everywhere else in the city and our other ordinances that we care about, like McMansion, heritage trees, compatibility standards, we don't know without the staff doing that legwork to, here's an inventory of stuff that we know was filed somewhere along the way, was expired, but now would spring back to life if we throw out these expiration dates.
Can I actually add another angle to this?
Go for it.
So one angle that I think people should also think about is the public safety angle. I serve the Public Safety Commission for the city, and one of the things that we're in the process of adopting is urban wildfire interface codes. So another thing that this type of thing could also prevent us from being the most up to date on is compliance with those wildfire requirements. And with the drought and the water issues that we're having, we're only going to see more of those problems coming up in the future. So environmental, compatibility, McMansion, those are all critical, but also think about the public safety aspect, the wildfire dangers and the things like that that can happen with all the new development.
Good point.
Because essentially developers have been squatting on land for years, since let's say 1995, could foreseeably resurrect those projects, those zombie projects that you're talking about. Am I on the right track with this? And
Right.
then that would, and that's what we're afraid it could possibly happen. Someone who's been sitting in that land, waiting for the right time, even though it's like record planning, development, review, permitting time over at One
Right.
Texas Center.
Right.
So I don't get that, but anyway,
Right.
I mean,
You could have folks
essentially what
squatting.
could happen is you've been squatting on this property for a couple decades, and now I've got all the pieces in line to go back to do what I wanted to do originally, but all the city code got in the way in the 90s.
Right. You could certainly have that scenario, but probably more frequently is you had landowners who sold the land with a market value that reflected that land was subject to more current standards. And now, since they got a bargain, they want a better deal. Throw those out, and all of a sudden, they're getting a windfall at the expense of the community.
And what is the liability of the city in that? Well, these people want to come back and say, we want our fair value.
Yesterday we were talking about this in our editorial meeting. I had brought up a point that because this one I didn't understand what it was on the agenda yesterday until it was explained to me. But this, some of the other discussions, the Austin Energy Governing Board, and several other items that they've done recently have been done with haste, or they've been done under the pretense of haste, even though we were told last year that this isn't ready for prime time.
Right.
and all of a sudden all these things are now required and must be done immediately. Is there an impetus for this, or are we? Am I drawing conclusions improperly in my newsroom?
I'm not sure I can speak to all those scenarios, but you know what they're saying. The emergency is right now is we have to take these steps to appease, you know,
The Attorney General.
the legislature and the Attorney General. But that's simply not true. And we've provided a law memo. We can give you a copy where AG opinions are regularly ignored by the courts. You know, frequent cases. They're not binding on the city, they're not binding on the courts, and they're only as good as the reasoning that is in those opinions. And this one is poorly reasoned, it's very cursory, it doesn't really look at the nuts and bolts. Assistant Travis County Tom Knuckles and the City of Austin's own lawyer Brent Lloyd both made very persuasive written arguments that said what the city's doing is legal, we're allowed to apply our expiration dates, as long as we conform them to the restrictions that have been on the books for 14 years.
To read from a letter signed by Brent Lloyd, Assistant City Attorney, and his conclusion to his letter, find that the city's application of the project duration ordinance complies with Chapter 245. Therefore, it complies with state law. He has said that we are in compliance in a letter that he's signed. We've got the same opinion from Greg Guernsey. We're in compliance. Why are these people not standing up and defending us?
I know both those folks.
So has Cope Watson said anything about this at all since he's been totally silent on the issue?
He has said nothing to me.
You might say
Maybe
something.
he's
But
saying to you.
I'm not a reporter.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Anything else?
So I'll offer that. Thank
Thank
you.
y'all.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
We'll try to do it justice in 2 minutes.